Alright, so for the benefit of those guys that weren't here last week, and for the benefit of those guys that were here last week, probably more those guys that were here last week actually, I'm going to do a recap of what we did last week. Very quickly, I'm going to go through that, and then it's going to launch us into this week's talk. This week's talk is on samskaras. Who's heard of this? Samskaras. Who's heard of this from me? I said, okay, right. Okay. Who's heard of it independently of me? Nigel? Oh, yes, Wendy?
Just heard the term, but nothing really concrete.
All right, okay.
It's in the Buddhist philosophy.
Yes, it is. It's in the Buddhist philosophy. It's in the ancient Indian or Vedic philosophy. That's where it comes from. This is not my idea. This is not my term. It's an actual Sanskrit term. Literally means emotional track or emotional scar. And this is the root or the building block of our egoic consciousness, the building block of our conditioned personality complex, all our neuroses, all our phobias, all our fears, all our limiting factors that create the egoic self really are a result of this one item, samskara. It's said that there's a great maya that surrounds samskaras. The maya is that no one knows about them, and yet they're everywhere. Each and every one of us has thousands, if not tens of thousands of samskaras, and we know nothing practically about samskaras. Hardly any information is out there. Very little. I'll give you some resources at the end if you're interested in terms of just maybe 2 books that I know that actually talk about samskaras directly. Probably only 2 books on the entire planet, actually. If you do a search on the internet, hardly anything comes back. Very little. In fact, what you'll find that comes back is ceremonial stuff. Vedic, ritualistic ceremonies, often are called samskara, and they're often confused between the two. But yeah, Nigel?
Well, there's a lot on conditioned behaviour and core beliefs, which is...
Psychology.
Equates to samskara?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it equates to it. I'll get to that in the talk, but it doesn't equate to the entirety of the subject. It's an aspect of the subject, not the whole thing. So what we're going to cover here today is the whole thing. So before we launch into that, I'm just going to do a quick recap of last week. I've saved myself a lot of time because I've done these pretty little drawings and pretty little diagrams. And there's a whole bunch more behind here, so I've got like 2 layers. So at some point when we start the talk, I'm going to have to peel this first layer off, roll it off, put it aside, and then we'll have the next level, which is today's talk. So where we were last week was really here, if you remember, the science of all realms and all dimensions. And we were really talking about the big picture and where we fitted into the cosmic scheme. Because we need to get the macro picture in order that we can understand the micro picture. Yeah? The reason for this is that we are really a reflection in microcosm of what is out there in the macrocosmic sense. So what is true for God and what is true for a galaxy, what is true for a solar system and a planet is also true for a human being. I'm sure most of us have heard of this. This is the Hermetic law. As below, so above, and as below, so above. We've heard that? Yeah, familiar. So what we're looking at last week really was the big picture. And what we're going to do this week is we're going to have this almost like microscopic vision. We're going to go into detail about us, human beings, what it is, who it is, why we're here, what we're all about. And I'm going to endeavour to do that, along with a summary, in 2 hours or less, with a little break at some point. Now I tend to, once I get my momentum going, I tend to not stop. So if anyone does want me to stop, or if it seems like you're getting a little bit, overloaded, please stop me. Loo breaks, water breaks, just a bit of refreshment perhaps, okay? Alright, so let's start. I'm going to go through this very quickly, so this is only a summary. I'm just going to take maybe 10 minutes to do this whole thing. So we started last week with the absolute. And remember, we were describing the absolute at the beginning of the talk as that which has no movement, that which is void, that which is empty. There is no light, there is no sound, and there is no form. It's complete emptiness. This is the absolute consciousness. This is distinct and separate from God. This is where we all start. At least this is where God starts. In Sanskrit, they call this state pralaya, which means a state of rest. And it's from the... Hi, Nikki. Yeah. And it's from this state of pralaya that there's an impulse born within the absolute. This impulse is to know himself. So he manifests two branches or two aspects of himself, which we will call the masculine and the feminine side. Both of them are identical. Both of them are exactly the same. We could call one the goddess, and we could call one the god. So we have the god and the goddess aspect, the masculine and feminine aspect. They're both identical, but completely diametrically opposite. So God, or the masculine, is the dynamic, expressive, molding, inspiring God, you might say. And then the feminine is the opposite, is the passive, receptive, fertile, chaotic aspect. Okay? These two aspects, God and goddess, go on two separate paths, cosmically speaking, and they meet at the level here of the human being. This is where the God and the goddess come together, a human consciousness. So we all understood that. In our culture, in our society, historically, at this present time, we have these two paths defined. We have the religious path, the God path, and we have the goddess path, which you might associate more with shamanism or paganism or tantra. You know, this is the goddess side. The Celts, actually, probably more towards the goddess. You've probably got most religions like Islam, Christianity, for example, all would be associated with the God aspect or the masculine side of religious thought and idea. But the main thing we need to understand about this is that the masculine is active. He holds the seed. And he's looking to mold or impregnate, you might say, the feminine, which actually is just open and receptive to receive that impression and create. And it's the same for us. If we want to reproduce, it has to be coming together, whether you like it or not, of a man and a woman. And it's the masculine that fertilizes the feminine that gestates and then delivers a new creation, a new baby into the world. And this is the same at the cosmic level. So where we're looking here is if we go down these levels of consciousness, at this level of the absolute, there is absolutely nothing. Masculine consciousness is the aspect of consciousness which is light. So as soon as the void moves, or as soon as there's a movement out of the void, there is light. It's in the Bible, let there be light, right at the very beginning. So this is the masculine light. So these higher realms are mostly realms of light. And the first thing we do is we project down from this level to this level. You might say this is our individual spirit. In Sanskrit, this is called the monad. It's the first emanation from the God aspect. This is not the feminine, just the God. Monad. That you might say is an individual spark of the divine. The monad has three aspects associated with it. Always have three. It's known as a triune manifestation. Three. They're over here. Monad spirit. First is the will, the impulse to create. Then comes love, then wisdom. These are the three aspects of the monad. But as a monad, as a divine spark of God, it doesn't know itself yet. It has to meet the feminine coming up the other way for it to see itself. And we'll get to that in a moment. So the will is there, the wisdom is there, the love is there, but it's unrealized. It's just in seed form. It's just in potential. Understand? So what happens then? The will manifests at the level of the monad plane. The love aspect, the love aspect comes down to the nirvana plane, and the wisdom aspect comes down to this buddhic plane. So these are the three aspects of the monad. What it does is it sends a thread of itself sequentially down to each level, creating that dimension or that realm. So at first there's only this level, the monadic plane. Then there's a thread that goes down. It creates this level, the atmic or nirvanic plane. There's another thread that goes down and it creates this level, the buddhic or the intuitional plane. This thread is like an axis and it continues down. So from here we then start to create the manas, mind, our emotions and physical reality. So each one of those is penetrated again by this axis, this vertical extension from each level to the next level, creating these sevenfold dimensions, these 7 levels of the universe. We're going to get into this much more today, but I'm just going to touch upon it lightly now because it's just a recap. You all okay with that? So what basically happens, this is reflected here, is reflected here. So from the monad and its three aspects, we get the atmic, the buddhi, and the manas. And then as we go down, we get the mental, emotional, and physical levels. So it's 3, 3, 3. Okay? That's very, very quickly, that's the masculine path, which is a descending path. The feminine is coming the other way. This is the goddess. So we often think of the earth as being feminine, that which is below us as feminine. That's an energy that rises, much like Kundalini rises. It's a feminine force that rises within us to meet the masculine. In fact, the feminine, really, if she was allowed to do it, would rush towards the masculine. And the masculine would rush towards the feminine, but these forces are held check within us. So the masculine force resides up here in the medulla oblongata. It's associated with the third eye. And the feminine force resides down here in the base of us, in a place called Kanda, right down the root chakra. And these two forces are kept apart. And the whole point of earthly or physical incarnation is to bring them together gently and sequentially. Gently moving what's down here in the base up to the crown. Although in the work that I do, in the work I teach, we also move the energy here, which is called Shiva, down the spine also to meet Shakti in the base. It's not commonly done, but if you're constantly stimulating Shakti, you may get too much arousal of the Kundalini force within you. It can create distortions and problems and overwhelming feelings in the emotions. So it can be a very tricky thing to do. So we move Shakti up, but we also move Shiva or consciousness down. This is the vertical axis within us. So this axis is all the way above us, it's all the way through us, and it penetrates all the way down to the core of the planet, the core of the earth. Remember from last week? Remember from 2 months ago?
Wasn't that long ago? Months ago?
Was it October, wasn't it?
July.
Yeah,
Something like that.
October. Okay, is everybody okay with that so far? This is just a quick recap. There was a lot more detail in this when we talked about it last week, but I'm just doing a summary here. All right? So where we meet is at this level here, the physical, what's called the physical etheric on this chart. This is where the human being is, at the third dimension. And this is where you get a perfect blending, you might say, of the goddess and the god forces within us, the Shiva and the Shakti forces. They come together. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So I'm going to take these posters down. Who watched the video? Nigel? Luca?
Some.
Some of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Sam?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So that was pretty much covered, and you would have seen that in the video as well. Let's just put these guys over here. Oh, thanks, Luca.
You're welcome.
Oh, blue picture, this, isn't it? There's just not quite enough wall space, so I just have to double up.
Those planes of existence, do they match up to the chakras?
Yes, they do. We've got that here, actually. This isn't one that I did, this is one I quickly downloaded this afternoon from the internet. So that's why it's a little poor in terms of its quality, but you can actually see here how the physical root chakra corresponds with the physical etheric realm. Yeah. And then we're moving up each chakra, moving sequentially up each realm. One important point to mention just before we get into samskaras, which is the topic of today's talk, is that really, if I just go back one poster here, perhaps this is probably a very key thing, actually two posters. I'm going to eventually get this on PowerPoint, but as yet we don't have a slide projector here, so there's not much point doing that. So I'm stuck with fiddling around with these posters. Yeah, let's just quickly put this one back up and mention this one thing, it's very important. As you can see, the monad exists at the level of the monadic plane. And it only exists, when, as it were, when we're not asleep, which is the adi plane. This is pralaya, this is sleep, this is stillness. This is the monad, this is the active component, spirit, the spark that comes out of the primordial fire, which you could say is the absolute. Yeah? This manifests itself on three lower planes, as I mentioned. Yeah? This together is comprised what we would call in the New Age community or the spiritual community, we would call this the higher self. So the monad manifests in three aspects of itself, sequentially down through the planes of Atma, Buddhi and Manas, is the higher self. What we are as the higher self is light. And basically that is our true nature. That is who we are. It's at that level we don't manifest an ego or a false identity or a personality. We're not like wearing masks. We are truly and authentically ourself, and are radiating that as light. It's the higher nature. What in this work we call the causal body. That causal body is created once and it dies once. But at the beginning of its creation, and while it exists, it sends down many, many mental, emotional, and physical components. These create our mental, emotional, and physical bodies. That's an ego, that's a personality, and that's very different from the higher consciousness, as we're all aware, I'm sure. Hey, Lovitan.
Hi.
Yeah. So this egoic personality really is the false self, that which is not defined by the higher nature or light. So you could say this is darkness, this is ignorance, this is nescience, as they say. This is us really not seeing, knowing, or understanding anything about our true nature. We're cut off, we're separate as an egoic consciousness from who we really are at the causative or causal level. This causal body will send down many, many, many hundreds, if not thousands, of egoic personalities into the mental, emotional, and physical realms as human beings, and other species as well, and other planets. Over the course of many, many, many millions of years, this goes on, and eventually we hopefully become enlightened. That'll be our last life when we become enlightened. And at that point, the causal body also dies. It moves up, back towards its source. So the causal body is only born once, and it throws down many, many egoic personalities over time, and then eventually itself will die. But what we're going to look at today is not so much what's going on here at the higher levels. I just wanted to point out that this really, you could say, is the higher self, or our higher nature, which is our true self, and it is of the nature of light. It exists for a very, 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 very long time. Some say millions and millions of years. Each egoic human personality, or otherwise, only exists for a very brief amount of time. So there's a lot of personalities over, like I say, a very long time before the causal body then is wound up. Remember that from last week? Yeah? Okay, we're ready. Is anybody really unsure or not that familiar or a little unclear about what we covered last week?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, of course.
From that higher self, does the body that was manifest as personality living at the same time at different places?
Yeah, from the perspective of the causal body, all incarnations are simultaneous.
Okay.
From the perspective of the egoic mind, they're all happening in sequential time. Yeah, we can't comprehend that. So, yeah, from that level, it's all happening at once. And we have more than this one incarnation happening at this time. All of us will have incarnations, maybe on the Earth, also in other planets, in other systems, and also simultaneously throughout all the dimensions. Because you can see as we're coming down through the dimensions that we exist at each level simultaneously.
Do we ever know each other?
What do you mean, Michael?
Those other dimensions and bodies?
Do we know them?
Yeah.
And we will know them, and we will remember about that when we leave the physical body.
But not in this body.
No, we can, and I'll get to that at the end of the talk. Yeah, that requires something called spiritual incarnation. It requires really incarnating those higher aspects. Hi, Jane. Yeah, grab a seat if you can find one. When I was a monk, we were very much involved with the aspect of consciousness, you know, what you would call light, or the masculine side. So we were really just looking at that. We had very little to do with the feminine. In fact, we completely separated ourselves from the feminine in many, many ways. Not just in terms of worldly engagement, but also women. You know, we were strictly celibate, and we lived that kind of a life, and In some respects, it was very nice and peaceful. And I sometimes hanker back to those times. Certainly less complicated. Less chaotic, yeah. Yes. But we were only concerned with the aspect of consciousness which was the active, dynamic, masculine aspect, which is light. And we were all looking to really go back to the light. So we saw this as a way of actually elevating the ego consciousness up towards heaven. And I believe, when I've researched a lot of this over the years, that's how most metaphysics and most philosophy looks at this, that we somehow have to ascend. So what I'm doing here, and what I'm trying to put across here, is that the opposite is true. Yes, we do ascend, but really what happens is that our higher nature, which is who we are, descends. And it's not a matter of getting out of physical incarnation, but bringing or incarnating more of that which is hidden in. And getting it grounded and here. And there's far too much of this in the spiritual world, including the world that I used to live in, where we're just completely spaced out and we're just completely off the planet most of the time. Because we're just engaging in the masculine side. And it's just taking us up and out. There's very little in the way of grounding. It was considered, when I was in the ashram, something that would be quite an unhealthy thing to do, for example, to be looking at one's stuff, to try to clear or heal or mend oneself in any way. If you ever had an issue or a problem in the ashram, it was meditation that was always the answer. You had to focus your mind, you had to do your service, and you had to meditate more. But there was no such thing as therapy, my God. You were suffering because of your conditioned mind and because of our conditioned body, but there was no remedy for that other than just to go more up. Yeah. And eventually I hit the ceiling, and I got a big bump on my head, and I came crashing down to earth. And I realized, actually, this is not really serving me. I can't go any higher because I'm not going any deeper. You know, as deep as you go, it will then qualify in a way for you to go higher. And as high as you go allows you to go deeper. The opposite is also true. But you reach a ceiling in terms of how far consciousness can take us, how far knowledge and understanding can take us. And it just becomes unfulfilling. And that's what I found. Not for everybody, but it took me 6 years and another 2 years of struggling before I finally realized, actually, I just couldn't do this anymore. I wasn't being honest to myself. And that's when I came crashing down to earth. And my God, did I crash. And it was shock. I was clinically depressed for 2 years. I didn't know what to do. I just didn't know how to deal with the feminine at all. Deal with the world or deal with women. It was a complete mystery to me. And I was nearly 30. So it was a massive shock for me. So let's go into, actually there was a question just...
No,
Chrissy?
I was just going to say that it seems to me, like in a lot of spiritual circles and stuff, that people do aspire to some of the teachings of like monks and people who are reclusive and are in that world, and I don't know how much of that is something that we can really implement in our daily life. I mean, yeah, we can, but whether that's not the whole story.
It's not the whole story, no.
Like people say, well, like it's always that meditation seems to be the thing that people recommend.
I know.
It doesn't seem to be to me.
No.
Main-
Well, the reason for that is because of samskaras. So let's get into this now. Otherwise, I'll not be talking about it at all, and we'll be just talking about last week's talk the whole time. it'll be a repetition of last week. So we'll get into that, Chrissy. Yeah, with this week's talk. Okay.
So is there a seat on there? Because I can't see anything.
Yes, there is one here. Yes. Yes, have a shuffle round. There we go. Do you want to move here a little time? Yes. Yes. Go on. You can come hold my hand. Let's have a quick reshuffle. Didn't bring Lola, no?
No.
I thought she might be interested.
Maybe.
Don't sit there, you got the wire.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sit there.
Okay.
Or you might trip it and pull it.
Yeah.
Do you want
Okay.
to put your jacket here?
Are we all comfortable? Okay. Samskara.
Oh God.
Yes. You alright there? You seem a bit squeezed in.
I'm right.
Are you okay? Alright. Okay, samskaras. Let's start. Finally. Okay, what is a samskara? A samskara basically is an imprint or a track in our astral body. That's what it is. Now, what do I mean by this? The astral body basically is our emotional body. Okay? When we come down through the realms of light, we eventually come into the astral world. When we enter into the astral world, very, very, very slow compared to the speed and the velocity of light in the higher dimensions. At this level of the astral, that world, that level, it can receive imprints from the world below, from our physical reality. So when we are born into this physical world, our consciousness is united with the etheric, physical component of consciousness. These are like sheaths around us. Oh, I've got another one here actually. Literally, they're called koshas. Can everybody see that? So we have a mental body, which is known as the Manomaya Kosha in Sanskrit. This literally means the sheath that comprises our mind and our thinking. And then coming down through the dimensions, we have the astral body, which is another sheath around us. Then we enter into the etheric body, which is known as the Pranamaya Kosha in Sanskrit, the vital force energy body. And then finally we come into physicality, which is known as the Annamaya Kosha. It literally means the body that is made of food. Each of these are like coatings or coverings upon us, and we enter each of them sequentially, the mental, then the astral or emotional, and then the etheric, and then the physical, physical being last. When we're finally in the physical reality, we're born. This is the moment of birth. At that point, our consciousness then is expressing through that sheath, through that kosha. And the way it does this is through the central nervous system. So the central nervous system really is key to enlightenment. It's not whether we come from a particular country or a particular culture, or we are white skin or we are brown skin. Basically what qualifies us is, as funny as it sounds, but that's how a lot of people think, or if you have a particular religious or cultural background, what defines our capability towards enlightenment is the fact that we all have a central nervous system. The central nervous system is uniquely defining us as human beings. That really is the cross that we get nailed to when we are born. It's at that moment that our consciousness expresses into and through our central nervous system. Well, I'm roughly trying to define by the senses here and the etheric matter and the connection here with the nerves, the spinal cord and the brain. Yeah? At this moment, as our consciousness comes into physicality, there is a feeling of, oh my God. And there's a shock, an enormous shock. And it is the shock of separation from the realms of consciousness and light. Suddenly, we've embraced, you might say, the feminine. And I can tell you, when I first did this, it was a bit of a shock for me. Because when we all come in, that's something that imprints and impacts upon us most powerfully. And I pointed to this last week, and I was saying basically this is our primal core wound. And it's the wound of separation or abandonment. It hits us at the very moment of our birth. When we are most vulnerable, when our defenses don't even exist, this is imprinted into the astral. Bang! This fundamental wound of abandonment or separation is at the core of the egoic consciousness. In fact, you could say ultimately we're on the journey back towards resolving our feeling of abandonment and separation. What comes out of that feeling of abandonment or separation is a feeling of self-loathing, self-hatred. I am not worthy. These are all secondary. They come next. And what happens then is that we go on a journey called life's experience. We experience a particular type of family, a particular culture, a particular society, a particular education and religious upbringing. These all serve to reinforce these core wounds within us, and they add to them enormously over time. So all of this together and collectively is imprinted into our astral chemistry, our astral makeup. Now what determines the strength or the size of a samskar is purely the intensity of the imprinting. The intensity, this is the key. The samskars that are most intense are printed most deeply, and vice versa. And what determines this is 100% subjective. Because we're constantly being imprinted at the astral level, we're constantly accruing samskars. The deeper, more core samskars obviously were there when our defenses and our vulnerability was low. Our childhood, going all the way back to our infancy and ultimately back to our birth with our core wounds. Yeah? Those were imprinted very, very deeply. We call these our core samskaras. But we're in the process of being samskared continuously because information is pouring in through the sensories, into the nervous system, and is constantly impacting into the etheric and leaving tracks or traces on the astral. So they say that the astral body is basically just made up of samskars. Whereas the baby, when it comes in, is clean and clear, and it's reflecting the true light of higher consciousness, and we all know that when we see or we look or we hold a baby, that we can feel that real affiliation and that connection of love that is shining through and radiating through that form. But very, very quickly, within a matter of a few short years, I would say probably 3, 5, 7 at the most, it's a very different matter, particularly from the point at which we develop language. When language skill comes on board, the separation becomes even more well defined, because we then enter into a stage of consciousness called objectivizing. We see ourselves as an object, we see other people as an object, we see everything as an object, because we have to label everything with language. It's implicit within the use of language that we develop this objective consciousness. Samskars, as I say, are imprinted according to intensity, and this is 100% relative to the individual. It's happening all the time. So there are very deep samskaras which come from very deep emotional tracks, from traumatic experiences, from shock, and from upsets, and from abuse. And there are very light samskaras, like what's going on here now. Everything that I'm saying, everything I'm talking about is leaving a track in the astral. Every sensory experience leaves a track in the astral. So we could call these micro samskaras. The core samskaras define our egoic consciousness. They define basically, or they give us a sense of our separated self. Can you see that? No? Yes? You can, yeah. This layer then builds up, it builds up and builds up over time until you get at the level of the astral what I would call a mob. So at the level of the astral, we really have a mob-like mentality. There are different intensities and different sizes and different strengths to the samskaras that exist there depending upon the intensity of the experience. And what is for me perhaps an intense experience, for somebody else might not be. Because it depends upon how we filter our experience to how deeply we're imprinted. Can you see this? Yeah? So for me, also, some things might be very casual and very light. And for somebody else, that might be very, very profound and very deep, and it really may shake them up. So I won't be hardly touched by that in terms of samskars, but the other individual will be. Yeah? So, samskars basically are imprinted. They're created by our experience here on earth, and they leave a trace in the astral. And eventually this builds up to such a degree that this then becomes all the astral is. So you could say the astral world really is made up purely of samskaras. Eventually there is nothing else there, there's just samskaras. So, why do they exist? Why do you feel, or maybe you might want to guess, as to why a samskar is created in the first place? Because eventually, you see, it becomes really the force that separates us completely from the light of heaven. It separates us completely from our higher nature. So why would we want to create a samskara in the first instance? It must have some function in terms of consciousness. Who can guess what that is?
So we can want to return.
So we can want to return. Yeah, okay. Yeah, nearly there. Yeah. Yeah, it does give us the impetus, because when we have samskars, we suffer. And there's a difference between pain and suffering. There's a distinction. Pain is going to happen as long as you've got the physical body. But suffering is identification with the pain.
To learn to have a human experience?
It will give you a human experience, yeah, exactly right, it will. But it's nearly there again, but the samskar really exists to protect us. In the Life Forces model, remember, I don't know how many here came to my Life Forces Human House talk. This is at the level of the animal. So basically what happens in terms of an experience, when it enters into our consciousness, that experience is encapsulated to protect us. It's like it's sealed off. So we don't experience that all of the time. Imagine if every single experience you ever had was active and concurrently running with every other experience you're ever having or are having right now, all of the time.
Talk about chaos.
Yes. It would be complete and utter chaos and overwhelm. Yeah.
So that's also the purpose of forgetfulness of other lives, and so you are just in this present moment. So you're not aware of all that's, all the layers that behind you.
Yeah, you are as a baby, but you can't communicate that. Babies are very open. Babies are almost, just as I say, the higher consciousness shines through their astral body very, very well. Not quite, because they do bring some distortion over. And there is some given to them by their genetics also, from their parents, from below. But a baby's consciousness, you could say, is the cleanest and the clearest. But you're absolutely right. As these samskaras accrue through our experience here, then eventually the light from heaven is completely cut off. Completely. And it leaves us in this space of darkness. It leaves us in this space of feeling alone and isolated, does it not? Like we are separate from ourself and from reality and life. This is one of the main characteristics of samskaras. It operates to separate us primarily from ourself, from the higher consciousness. So it doesn't allow consciousness to penetrate into the wound and into the hurt, for that to be registered continuously all the time in our consciousness. Otherwise we'd just feel it continuously. And we would never function, we'd never be able to live maybe beyond the age of about 3. Can you see?
Yes.
Yeah, Michael.
I think you said something about that we create the samskaras. What is?
Well, we don't create them intentionally. So this is a subconscious mechanism. And really samskaras really define within us the realm of the subconscious mind. So the higher consciousness is that which is our higher nature, our causal body. That is just light that's seeking to express through the astral plane, like it does in a baby, because it's clean and clear. But when we accrue all these samskaras, then that light cannot penetrate through into physical consciousness. Can you see? Because it's blocked at the level of the astral. There's a barrier there. It's like concrete. It's like pouring concrete all around you and literally entombing yourself. And some of us are very, very entombed. I mean, I speak of myself included in this. We're very entombed.
But are you saying then that we don't inherit samskaras from previous lives? That we come in sort of fresh, new
We
lives?
do. We do bring over
We do.
core samskaras from previous existences.
So they're in us when we're born.
Yeah, and we carry those samskaras with us to the higher planes of consciousness from our previous deaths.
Yeah.
But those samskaras at the moment of death are actually collapsed into a seed, and they're protected from the higher vibrations of the higher realms, because if they weren't protected, they would be immediately destroyed as soon as you started moving up through the astral, mental, into the causal plane.
But they start manifesting the minute you're born.
Yeah, you carry those seed samskaras, which were the core samskaras from the previous life, into this new incarnation, and they become active within us by the time we are 28. They say it's impossible to be enlightened before the age of 28 because the astral body takes that long to enmesh or to become integrated into the etheric physical. It takes that long, in other words, for the astral to become incarnate. 28 years. But the samskaras, I feel, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, start to become active during the time of our teens, when we're down in this center here, the third chakra. That's when I felt it the most powerfully in terms of my sense of hurt and pain and indignation and separation from my parents and everybody, and life generally was in my teens, in that rebellious, time that we all go through. All the way through, fully integrated. We've got all our samskaras active and on board by the time we are 28. In fact, we have really what it is that we've been presented with in any incarnation by the time we are 28. That's when the astral body is fully incarnate. All our samskaras, major ones anyway, are on board. We can create them at any time, because I can tell you, since I was 28, I've had a lot of shock and a lot of trauma as well, and I've created quite a few more. But I've only added to this core set. It's like a trajectory that I've set, and we all set for our life, depending upon what our core wound is. It's like we'll just go for that core wound over and over and over again, repeating behaviors. And this is one of the key aspects of a samskara. Yes, it's created to protect us from that feeling and from that emotion, because we need to survive. We experience something, we can't just be awake to that experience continuously and forever until we die. So it protects us, it seals it off. And it remains dormant within our consciousness. And because it's dormant and because it's sealed, we can then carry on and be functional. We can grow up, we can develop in normal ways, and we can continue to operate within this world. If it wasn't for that, I don't think we'd get out of infancy. I think it would just be too distressing. Yeah. So the samskara contains, if you like, the imprint from the experience, as I was describing. This is like a little recording. Have I got my little recording diagram? No, I haven't. That's in Norway. Anyway, that's that little recording inside of the samskara of the experience. And that sits there as a wound, as a little trauma, you might say, a little demon with his pitchfork. And nothing happens until that samskara is activated, until that samskara is triggered. Now we hear this all the time, and I even say this to myself all the time. I'm feeling triggered. Or, you're triggering me. Yeah, how dare you? You're pushing my buttons. Yeah, we're all familiar with having our buttons pushed. I'm sure. I don't think there's anybody here that could actually say that they don't know what I'm talking about when I say that. What we mean when I'm triggered or I'm having my buttons pushed is a samskara is being activated. Why is it activated? It's because it gets energy from the outside world that is a corresponding energy to itself. Like attracts like. So if you have a samskara, which is to do with, let's say abandonment issues or self-hate issues, every time someone rejects you, like a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a lover or whatever, they say, don't want to know you anymore, that samskara will become active. It awakens and it plays that recording. It releases the recording. This is what they call activation of the samskara. That recording comes out in its original form with the force and the intensity and the pressure and the tenacity with which it was imprinted. So it may be a small event, and yet the emotion that's released is enormous. Can you see this? So one of the keys to understanding samskaras is actually they're just recordings. And our life really has got absolutely zero, and I mean absolutely zero, to do with how we can better ourselves, other than the fact it's triggering and awakening these samskaras within us. It's never to do with the person, the situation, or the external circumstance. Never. And yet we always think it is, and the reason is because of a simple formula. Who's good at maths? No, No, not me either. I'm good at maths, yeah, but I'm not going to do maths. I was just getting worried there. I'm not actually going to do maths. Stimulus. That's the trigger from the outside world. Comes into our nervous system. Can I look at that?
It's okay.
It comes into our nervous system. It activates a samskar within the astral. When the samskar becomes active, it then puts out what we call an emotion. That's a reactive mechanism. As a reaction. This is how things always work. Stimulus or trigger, samskar, emotional reaction. Now I'm going to make a distinction in about a minute or two between emotions and feelings, because they are totally 180 degrees separate, and yet we tend to bunch them together and think an emotion is a feeling. They are not the same. Now I'll get to that in about a minute or two. But before we get there, I want to talk about this because this is key. We never experience this. What we experience is this.
Sorry, I couldn't see it. What did you
We never experience this. Stimulus, samskar, emotional reaction.
Okay.
That's what happens. But we never experience it because this happens way too quickly most of the time. And what we experience is stimulus reaction. Yeah? We miss out the middle bit. Yes.
Is it similar to the activating event, the behaviour it causes and the consequence of that behaviour?
Similar to the activating event, the behaviour it causes.
Behaviour it causes,
So that's
and
the
then
activating
cause
event.
and the consequences.
No, you still miss samskar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the behaviour is at this level.
Right.
You're already here.
Can you say samskara equips subconscious mind? Or
Subconscious. Samskara is the subconscious mind.
equal the same exactly?
Equal.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Samskara and the subconscious are equal.
Okay.
In fact, samskara is the root of psychology. There's two aspects to this. There's our somapathic samskars, our bodily samskars, which is the feminine type of samskar, and there's our neuropathic masculine samskars as well. That's why I have two charts here. So we have the emotional samskars and we have also the mental samskars. We'll get to that in a moment. I'm just dealing with the bodily feminine aspect at the moment. Remember, the physical body and the etheric body is part of the feminine process. It's rising. The masculine consciousness only comes down as far as the astral. It stops. The masculine doesn't go any further than the astral. It's the astral that grabs the etheric and the physical and drags us into incarnation. Astral literally means to grasp. And that's exactly what samskars do. They basically have a mechanism which is grasping. That's how they operate. And they grasp us. They grasp the etheric and the physical, and they lock us into our central nervous system, into physicality. What happens when we dream is that these two components separate. Our astral separates from the etheric physical. The masculine goes off in consciousness into the realms of light and has experiences called dreams, and the etheric physical is asleep, resting in bed. And without the grasping effect, or the locking, holding, tightening effect of the astral on the etheric can then replenish and recharge the physical. Because it's the astral's grip on the etheric that causes constrictions and restraints in the flow of energy, life force energy in the etheric. And that's where we get tired and worn out with our daily chores and our daily life. And it requires this separation for our physical to once again become vitalized by the etheric body without the interference of the astral, which is off having a jolly good time hopefully somewhere, some astral plane no doubt. So this is the mechanism here: stimulus, samskara, emotional reaction. I've got it written here actually. Trigger, samskara, samskara mechanism, emotional reaction. That always happens. The key to unwinding samskaras is to catch this part, the bit that's missed. That's the key. And that's the key also to enlightenment. It's the key to actually elevating or ascending or descending consciousness if you're talking about spiritual incarnation. Because what happens here, when we resolve a samskara, basically we clean that aspect of our astral, and it allows the light of heaven to come through again. Can you see? Whereas previously that was like a boulder or a block that is obscuring the light from heaven. Now that light can shine through directly into our astral and into our physical. Another part of us that is hidden, we're now aware of. Yes, Lizzie?
How do you resolve it? Just by becoming aware of it?
I'm going to get to that a little bit near the end.
Okay.
Yeah, but awareness is a big part of it. In fact, there are two aspects to this, always. There are two aspects to this, masculine and feminine. So you have the masculine component, which is to do with meditation, yoga, various practices which are to do with consciousness. And then you have the feminine component, which is to do with therapy and energy and alchemical processes. If you have the two going together, then you're going to have the best way to unwind these samskaras. So we do the method of, well, I recommend that the methodology involves masculine and feminine processes simultaneously. In fact, I always recommend that no matter what we do. If you want to have a rapid and progressive result, masculine and feminine processes simultaneously. So consciousness work and energy work together in anything brings about the maximum results, including meditative process, yogic processes, all these processes, healing processes. It's best that we don't go for one polarity or another, but we bring the two together. So a samskara, it's an imprint, it's a recording, it gets played, and it just plays the same thing forever. It never changes its tune, it never changes the recording. So this is just endless loops of behavior, endless emotions being expressed, endless repetition of our reactions to things. Can you see that? It's a repetitive universe if we're in the samskaric universe. And most of us are like that. We tend to repeat the same stuff. It's the same baggage, right? Over and over and over again, endlessly, until it drives you bonkers. It drives me bonkers. It's like, oh God, here I go again. How did I not see that coming? You know. Yeah. And yet we don't, because the samskara by its very nature is subconscious. And yet even though it's subconscious, it's sending out a signal, it's sending out energy, it's attracting the similar from the universe. So it's as if we're setting the stage all the time. You see? Of course, when they're active, we're really pulling the chairs and the tables together. You know, it's like, you know, we're going, this is what my life is, this is how I define myself, this is my behavior, my expression. It's just a recording. It's got absolutely nothing to do with higher consciousness. In fact, one of the key things about samskaras is it short circuits the higher self. Short circuits the higher consciousness.
How?
Because we're existing purely in the astral. Who said how?
I.
Yeah. Because we're existing purely out of the reactive mechanism of the astral world. We don't penetrate to the causal body. It's either astral or it's mental, but not anywhere beyond that. We have to go all the way back to the causal if we want to go to the root of our consciousness. This is who we are. We are that divine spark, that consciousness which is pure. Remember what I said? In the higher realms we are light. But none of that is getting through to the mental and astral planes because we're just so samskared. So when we get a stimulus from the world, it comes into our central nervous system, goes into the etheric, hits a samskar, the reactive mechanism unwinds, it activates it, that then comes back out through our central nervous system to the world as an emotional response.
That's the purpose of living.
Well, yeah, up to a point. But the higher consciousness is not involved in any of that. That does not go up to the causal level and to the higher nature and then come down as a response from there. I mean, that's what you'd be ultimately looking at. But that doesn't happen. You've short-circuited the higher nature. And this is the key behind samskaras, is they operate as a kind of short circuit to higher consciousness.
Yeah, you said we miss out on the samskara and we're into the emotional reaction, but the only way of getting to that samskara is through your emotional reaction.
Yeah, it is.
That's the only way back
I know.
to
It's-
therapy or whatever.
I know. Yeah. And the one thing that cleans samskaras is consciousness and light,
Yeah.
which is the one thing samskaras block. So we're constantly in these catch-22s, you see, it's like... Yeah, I'll explain how to get out of that in a little while. Yeah, we'll get to that.
So it's just
Yes, Lucy, yeah, go ahead.
sorry.
Yeah, and I'll get to you in a minute, Chrissy.
It's constantly attracting what it needs to
Yes,
heal from.
yes,
Yeah?
It's constantly-
Is that why?
yeah.
So that you can heal, so that you can learn from it.
Yeah, samskaras, even in a dormant state, will actually still attract. The bigger, the more intense samskaras will powerfully attract.
Yeah.
But when they're activated, my God, do they thrust you into the stage of life. They thrust you into creating that trauma again, creating that abandonment again, creating that self-hatred again, that jealousy again, that rage again. Can you see?
Yeah. And so that's
But you will
happening
attract those situations all the time.
Yeah. So that's happening so that you can wake up from it.
It is. That's it.
Yeah.
That is the mirror. You got it. That is the mirror. Our samskaras are actually helping us. They're actually revealing to us who we actually are. Because they represent who we are not. Can you see that? They're showing that they're actually those aspects of us which are in the darkness, which are hidden away. And we're not that. And as soon as we bring that which we are, which is light, to a samskara, game over. But this happens horizontally in a feminine way, and it happens vertically in a masculine way. And like I say, you have to put those two together as well in order that you can really effectively deal with samskaras. Because most therapies even, and most people, even meditators, only deal with mostly the surface level of our samskaras. What we would call our conditioned samskaras, the micro samskaras. See, we have within us a core set, all of us. And then we have hundreds and thousands probably of smaller, well, medium-sized and smaller samskaras. But only a handful of core samskaras. And this, really, at the astral level, is like an ocean. It's like an ocean. And there are two ways that you can deal with that. One is to try and actually have endless therapy and endless processes dealing with every single samskara until you eventually clear the whole lot out.
Is that,
You were here last week,
is
weren't
that the
you?
purpose of life?
You know why that's not possible. It's impossible. Not only would you have to work 24 hours a day and never sleep, you would never even touch maybe 2% of the entirety of what's there in an entire lifetime. So, you know, we call this trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. And a lot of us are like that. We're going, oh, I've done some more emotional work, I've done some more clearing work. Fucking hell. I mean, you know, it's like, excuse my language, but you know, what do you really mean? You know? Because I could just go on forever. Just clearing emotions, clearing emotions, clearing emotions, clearing emotions. It's just basically just clearing samskaras. But where does that stop? It never stops. And particularly when you think that at an astral level, we are a mob, we are a collective, and we're much less individualized. There's an overlap with everybody else's astral field and the planetary astral field. So then you get into what's called the unconscious or collective unconscious. So we have an unconscious aspect, you say that's the subconscious, that's our samskaras, but the rest of it, outside of what we actually have ourselves, is the unconscious aspects of ourselves. But they all overlap. So where do we begin and where does somebody else end? You know, it's like, it's a mingle. So even when you get through your own stuff, it's like, well, actually I'm still going, you know. It's like,
You're more or less saying there's no point starting even, but
there's absolutely no point starting,
surely
right?
the more you do it, the more light you're bringing in, the better you're feeling.
You are. Yeah, you are. You're going to feel a bit better.
Only
But, yeah, you'll feel better temporarily.
so when you're about to die, you say, I'll feel a bit better.
Well, you'll probably feel really knackered and exhausted from all that work.
So what's the point in therapy then?
that is a feminine process, and what I'm describing here is a horizontal process. Yeah? If we use the analogy I gave last week of the rower and the boat, yeah? So if you wanted to get from the shore of nescience and darkness and ignorance to the shore of enlightenment, you've got to go over this ocean or this lake or this river, however you want to see that, onto the other shore. So if you're the man in the boat, you've got to start rowing. The rowing is synonymous with meditation, with consciousness work, mindfulness. You've got to do that because you want to bring the higher nature into incarnation. But at the same time as wanting to bring higher consciousness down, you've got to pull up the anchors. And this is what I was missing when I was in the ashrams, going back years and years. We were just learning how to be ferocious rowers and hoping to drag our anchors across. Or maybe even better still, snap them. You've got to have a tremendous strength of discipline to be able to do that. And for most of us, particularly in the West, we don't have the amount of time, the social, cultural conditioning, or even the inclination to sit and meditate for 8 to 10 or 12 hours every single day. Some of us struggle to do 8 to 10 or 12 minutes a day. That's like, that's enough, that's overload. And that's what the yogis do, that's what the yogis did, going back through time. That's what their practice is and still is today. Those guys that are involved in those arts, they're working the rows, they're rowing. But what we do in the West also, and what we do here, and a lot of us actually in this room, including myself, is we're very good at therapy. We have the energy component. We can go and lift up the anchors, which is this horizontal process. Yeah? But you've got to put the two together, because the key to it is to go vertical, not horizontal. Because if you're going horizontal the whole time, you're just doing therapy, 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 but you're not actually gaining anything in consciousness and awareness and self-realization through all that work, then you're not going vertical. You're just doing energy work, and that'll just go on forever. It's got to be coupled with the vertical axis. So you couple the energy work with depth. And this is the key to clearing samskaras. I was going to get to this at the end, but you've asked me this 3 times already, so I thought, okay, let's give it to them. As deep as you go, you'll be able to clear deeper and deeper and deeper samskaras. Now, what happens when a samskara is released? When that capsule, that recording, is activated and it opens and that recording comes out, it's absolutely tiny. Minuscule. But most of us feel our emotions like they really rock us. I mean, when you get really angry or enraged or jealous or mad or crazy, it's like that's powerful. And yet every single samskara at its root is tiny. It would hardly be noticed if it wasn't for one other thing. And this is called the amplification effect of the astral body. That tiny samskara activates other samskaras. So other samskaras become activated. And then other samskaras become activated. And you get what you might call a nuclear or a chain reaction that within a flash spreads through the entire astral body. So from a tiny release of emotional energy, you have a fully, violently activated astral body, which is just tossing and turning and milling and disturbed, and everything is just in a state of chaos and upheaval. And this is the amplification effect of the astral. It's the amplification effect, and it's a little bit like taking an image and reflecting it through hundreds of mirrors. Instantly. Well, not quite instantly. It takes a fraction of a second. Because we can go from feeling quite normal and quite okay to being completely insane. I'm sure most of us have experienced that. And how long does it take? Not very long, does it? So we've gone from here to here, and we've completely missed this out again. So there's the job of consciousness, the job that goes deep is our meditation. It is the rower, and it's the job of daily mindfulness. It's the job of catching the samskara before it amplifies our whole astral body. And in fact, we want to catch it just as it's emerging. Because if we're going to catch it just as it's emerging, it's tiny. And we can halt it. And if we bring light and consciousness to it, which is what light is, because that's what we are at the higher level, it's end of. It's what becomes transubstantiated. Transubstantiated. So samskaras are not transformed. It's a little bit like if you imagine, as I say, that the astral body is a house. And the house is made of bricks. And the astral body is made up of samskaras. So if you wanted to replace, say, red bricks with black bricks, you'd have to take out one brick and put a brick in, and take out another brick and put a brick in, and take out, and it's a bit like that's called transubstantiation. So the original brick is not being transformed, it's being replaced. Can you see it? And that is how our astral body is restored into a clean and pristine astral body. So it's as if we release that samskara and we replace it with the consciousness that should have been there, that was there in the first place. It's like as if a space opens for that consciousness then to shine through. And then more of ourself at that moment has incarnated into physical reality. Something that was hidden has now been revealed. And the mirror of human life has actually shown us that through the mechanism of samskaras. So the two key things here in terms of resolving a samskara is mindfulness. That's the first thing. Daily mindfulness. And specifically tracking into the samskara, not missing this middle bit, catching it. It's fast, it's a fraction of a second fast, but you can catch it. There are stages and there are processes in this, and I have noticed this myself. You'll probably notice it if you really look into this when you're being triggered next. And it won't be long before you will be, I'm sure. So you'll get an opportunity soon enough. Yeah? Look at what happens. Just look at what happens. It's like there's the trigger, right? And then there's something inside that feels like something's moving. Yeah, that's the activation of the samskara, right? That movement then, as it were, goes into the mind, and then enters into our emotions and feelings. It then becomes powerfully activated. It then expresses. Yeah. Yeah.
But some people don't express, they never express.
They suppress it.
They suppress it.
That's
Yeah.
sad, isn't it? That's sad.
It is sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sad. That's even worse.
Yeah.
Suppression is described as having an elephant in your living room, stomping around. Because eventually, that is just going to explode. Because what you're doing there is you're actually shoving that energy back down. It's got nowhere to go. So you're just containing it and winding it like a spring. And the more you suppress it, the more energy that you add to that samskara in terms of holding it in place and not allowing its expression. In some respects, it's healthy to express it, although it's not functional. But suppression is even worse. Or denial. You're just going, yeah, I'm okay. Nothing wrong with me.
Can I say, can samskara be the drive of life in a way?
Can it be the drive of life?
Mm.
Well, it
Could
is.
be the driving force of.
Yes, it is in a way, if we have a perspective and an attitude towards it which is healthy.
Mm.
If we're not aware of this and we're just stimulus emotional reaction all the time, which, to be quite honest, is probably 98% or 99% of most humans on this planet, our higher nature is not incarnate, it's not here, it's not involved in anything at this physical level. As I say, we've short-circuited higher consciousness all the time, and we're just in this reactive, reflective consciousness, constantly just bouncing off the astral, or the mental. This is where some of us might get a bit upset, but the mental is equally as true as the astral. I'm going to get to that in a moment. We're still working here. How am I doing? I'm boring you, am I, Luca?
No, you think right.
So you're yawning there.
No.
Okay. Chrissy, yeah.
When you started talking about this, you said it's absolutely nothing to do with when it gets activated.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with
No, nothing to
the
do with it.
external thing. But there you're saying that you need that stimulus to activate
You
it.
do. Yeah, that's
So
why we're here.
It must be something to do with it.
Oh yes, in terms of a stimulus, but it's not the stimulus that is
reason.
the problem. Yeah. It's never the stimulus, it's the problem.
But we actually, or is there another way to activate some scars?
Well, there are. Yes, there are. Okay, we'll get into this now. Because you can be activated by your environment, yeah, which is an experience, it's a person, or a thing, yeah. Or you can be activated, as I pointed out earlier, by another samskara, which what happens in the astral body. There's this magnification, this amplification effect that we all experience when the samskara is released. Without that, a samskara would be tiny, it would hardly be noticed. So samskars activate samskars. But there's also another thing that activates samskars, which is thoughts. Thoughts and samskars go together. So there's a samskar that is connected to a certain belief or a certain pattern of consciousness. So every time that samskar gets activated, those thoughts get activated. Every time you think in that way, that samskar gets activated. We'll get to thoughts in a moment. They're a very subtle dimension of samskars, something called chitta, which we'll go into in a little while. But yeah, thoughts activate samskars, samskars activate samskars, people, experiences, events, objects activate samskars. Yeah. So we're really, in a way, we are just reactive beings at one level.
What about if you go to see somebody who is an enlightened teacher? That would surely activate them as well, in a different way.
Well, samskars
Yes.
shouldn't do. If they were truly enlightened, it should actually bring more of your higher consciousness in.
But maybe activate
Oh,
it
that's
the
the
wrong
other thing
way.
that activates
Make
samskars. Very
it-
important. Higher
make it
consciousness
conscious.
activates them. Huh?
I mean, it wouldn't necessarily end in an emotional reaction, but wouldn't it make you aware of those things?
Yes, that's what I was just saying there, Chrissy. Exactly right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. When you're with someone that is enlightened, or they are more enlightened, perhaps, yeah, that will actually draw your higher consciousness more into physical incarnation, because like also attracts like. You see.
Yeah.
So you feel attracted at the level of your consciousness to this individual, to their light, to their essence, to that vibratory level. It brings you down. As you come down into physicality more, it illuminates and starts to break up. It activates samskars. Which is why when you're doing meditation, or you're doing these disciplines and practices, you can go through all shades of emotional hell without being activated by anybody or anything. You're just sitting there, breathing. Yeah, you're thinking, what? You know, I mean, I've experienced this so many times. It's like, well, is this my reward? You know, been diligently doing this. Why are you punishing me like this? But you know, this is my sort of like petty gripe. I mean, that's just another samskar. You know, it's a self-pity samskar. You know, somewhere in my psyche, that's going, I deserve better. You know, poor me. But what's actually happening is that these things are being activated in order that I can actually stick with the process, stick with the meditation, stick with the practice, and eventually they will be cleared. Because we're working there with the vertical access. Yeah, we're drilling, we're going deep towards the core samskaras. Yes, Liz?
But if you're only going to do a teaspoon of them, why? What's the point?
Well, no point. Why bother? If you're only going to do a teaspoon at a time, well...
You said we'd only do a teaspoon in our lifetime, or...
well, if you're just working horizontally, yes.
Oh, I see.
Can you see?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not to say you won't ever get confronted by deep, dark stuff, because you probably will. But generally speaking, we tend to work more at the surface level, because samskars protect themselves.
So
The
you
ego
say
consciousness generally protects
the
itself.
vertical and the horizontal, and now on the female you will...
Male and female
feel
together.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's about energy work, it's about awareness, it's about lifting those anchors at the same time as rowing, which is going deep. Can you see? So, yeah, the deeper we go, really, is only, well, it's only really dictated to by how high we can go in terms of our meditational practices. You know, as high as we go corresponds to how deep we can go. And how deep we can go corresponds to how high we can go, which was the bit that I was missing when I was in the temple. Because we were just trying to go high, but we were lacking depth. And then they went completely the other way, and went completely deep, and totally forgot about meditation and yoga, and just became totally traumatized for about 2 decades. Yeah, and then thought, hang on, that's not right either. You come back, It's the two together, it's the masculine and the feminine always. So it's the energy work and consciousness working together. Lifting the anchors and rowing the boat.
What's the horizontal if those are two up and down? What was the horizontal rowing?
Well, this is the energy work, really. This is like therapy,
Yeah.
energy processes.
So that's one horizontal.
No, that's horizontal. Feminine is horizontal, masculine is vertical.
Yeah,
So you're
this
doing
is
the energy work
horizontal.
horizontally.
Okay.
Yeah, which are feminine processes, alchemical processes.
Mm.
So these are to do with therapy, various processes that we go into. Mindfulness probably I would say would come into that to some degree because to do with our life and being mindful of our existence here. Can you see?
Yeah.
And then coupling that with yoga, pranayama, deep meditation practices that take us deep. So we're mindful and we're aware as we're going through our life and we're engaging energetically in various processes. And at the same time, we're also practicing consciousness work. That's the combination that I understand is the best combination. Most of us go into one or the other. We just go into therapy and let's just do the energy work. Or we just go, let's just be conscious. Yeah. But both of them are actually defined by the other. It's a bit like if we do the consciousness work, we've only got the rower, but we've got all the anchors still. If we do the energy work, we're lifting up the anchors, but we're not rowing the boat. So we stagnate. I've often felt this in my spiritual life. I feel like, oh God, I feel like I'm just going nowhere. I just feel like I'm stagnating. I forgot to get the rower in the boat. So it does feel like that when you've got no rower, because you're aimless, you're pointless, you're just meandering, even though you may be lifting anchors. So the key is to go deep and wide at the same time.
But ultimately, this feels like an unsolvable puzzle because.
Well, it's not actually, and I'll tell you why.
Can I just say, because you're
Yes.
saying that who we really are is the light, but that's not our original being. The original being is the void, nothing. So there'd be no, because the light's coming out of that.
Yes.
That was the original state.
originally.
Is that?
Yeah.
So if that's what we're returning to, what's really deep down the incentive that feels like the core wound is that fear of that total annihilation.
Total
of
annihilation.
Going back to that.
Yeah.
But then, being in that, it wanted to know itself, so it created all this. So
Yes. it
that
has.
to me seems the unsolvable.
Well,
are we going to keep going round and round that? Because in
Yes,
that
we
feels
are.
like there's never really a really ultimate, loving, peaceful, wonderful state that all passes back to
Yes.
the total gone.
I need to remind you a little bit about Talk 1, just a little bit. Yeah. You are not eternally in this position as a human being. See, when we clear our samskaras, what we allow to happen is for our energy, our feminine energy to arise, which is the mother-child energy within us. It's of the earth, it's of the feminine. That comes up. We call this the Kundalini Shakti. Yeah? When that rises within our body, that feels like ecstasy. It's like a cosmic orgasm. This is the whole point of Tantra. The other force that comes down, as you know, is the masculine force that wants to meet the feminine force on its way up. And it does that at 7 levels of consciousness. We talked about this last week, which we defined as the chakras of the gateways. You remember? Yeah. So it's meeting at every level, masculine and feminine. But the masculine consciousness coming down is what's called blissful consciousness. Where they meet at these gateways is called ecstatic bliss. Now, you are part of that originally ecstatic bliss because you are the perfect balance of masculine and feminine energies once you exit out of the world of polarity, back to the causal plane. Everything has come into perfect balance. So you are at that point ecstatic bliss. Yeah? Ecstatic bliss, in my understanding, is the experience that we have of as human beings of unconditional love. That's what unconditional love feels like, because it requires the man and the woman, the feminine and the masculine, coming together to create this. You could say child, which is the Christ consciousness. Yeah? That, yes, you're right, it does cycle in the higher planes, because there are times when it's resting during Palaya, and there are times when it's active, when universes and galaxies and everything's created, what's called the Manvantara. Yeah? And these are supposed to be equal, night and day. It's described this in the scriptures. Brahma has an equal night to the day. And it's an endless cycle. But from this perspective, we don't know what happens during the Pralaya. All we know is that we go off to rest. And there are some scriptures which are rooted in the Bhakti tradition which basically say that when we go there, we go home. Which we return then back to Leela. Yeah? Which is pure ecstatic bliss, unconditional loving consciousness. But manifestation is halted. Can you see? Because it's pure stillness. It's pure stillness. So it's only a question of perspective, and no one really knows what happens, but the scriptures in India, the Vedas, do point to there actually being a continuation at some level in terms of Leela, and they get extensively into this in certain scriptures like the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita. These scriptures I've read many times. I mean, you've probably heard of the Mahabharata, the Ramayana. They're talking about these Leelas, or these pastimes that go on at the higher levels of consciousness. All we're talking about here is this universe and all the planes and levels of consciousness associated with this universe. But beyond that, there is something. Void is the emptiness, you might say, but there is something still. So this ecstatic, blissful, unconditional loving consciousness, which is at the root of everything. And that's not a bad thing to be cycling through.
Well, that's what I dream of, but then you listen to people like Mooji, who I hear it again and again, that actually that bliss, ecstatic feeling, they're again passing, they're temporary, like clouds passing over that nothingness, and that nothingness is here right now. There's no more seeking because it's between every thought, every feeling.
Yeah, there is that common idea. There are two branches of Vedic knowledge. There's the Advaita and the Vaita. Remember last week again, Advaita and Vaita. He is of the Advaita school. The individuals that practice Advaita philosophy in India are known as Gyanis. Gyanis. It's through their mind and through their understanding. They practice a process of not this, not that, not this, not that, and eventually they say, I'm not anything. Basically, they just annihilate themselves, you know. In the ancient days, they were known as Mayavadi.
Is that a non-duality?
Yeah, non-duality.
Non-duality
Basically, me and God are one. And eventually my individual existence will cease to be as I merge with the ocean of the oneness. I will cease to exist. Then there is the other school, which we covered last week, which is the Vaita school, right? Which basically says that we are eternally distinct from God. It's a bit like Christians think this, you know, there's God and there's us, right? Lots of religions think like that, separate, yeah? But the ancient Vedas, as I said last week, again, said Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva. We are simultaneously but inconceivably one and different. So we never lose our sense of individuality, and yet we are always one with Source.
I like that bit.
It's wicked, isn't it?
I like that.
Yeah. And the analogy I give here is it's not that we have the drop merging with the ocean, but that the whole of the ocean merges into the drop. It's very clever, because you can see the whole ocean is there, God is there, everything is there, and yet we are still distinctly a drop. And that's Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva, which I believe is the correct view, not the Advaita school, which is oneness and nihilism, and not the other school, which says we were eternally separate either. Both of these are really old archetypal processes in ancient, particularly Indian culture and philosophy, that were actually just babies around here in the West. We just, you know, I mean, who ever heard of Advaita philosophy going back 10 years in the West? It's like it's a new thing, you know, it's like... But these have been going on for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. These processes were known very, very well. And there's a tradition, there are traditions down each leg of these. So you have the Advaita traditions with, you know, with various gurus and teachers that will teach that, and then you have the Vaita tradition which teaches this. And they have their own schools, their own gurus, their own teachings, their own processes, and they go. And neither of them, I believe, are actually true. In fact, I'd go as far as saying, right here and right now, they're both false. They're both false.
Could it be they are different type and there's no one truth?
No, they're both false.
Okay, so
Yeah. See, reality and truth is something that is part of what you would call natural law. You know, we can justify, we can make something like, oh, this is true, because of our perception of it. But when we're perceiving something to be true, we're actually just looking at it through our samskaras, because samskaras colour wash perception. We look through our samskaras all the time, so we are not able to see at all until we are completely clear what is actually reality. Because all the time our perception is colour washed by samskaras. Constantly, 100% of the time.
We just see subjective truth.
It's subjective truth, yeah. And saying like, oh, it's all okay, it's all fine, oh, that's true, this, it's rubbish. Because there's no objective truth in that. You're saying basically reality is completely subjective. Well, if reality is completely subjective, why don't you just walk off a cliff and see if you can fly? Why don't you just put your hand into fire and feel it's going to be cool? Because you feel that fire is cool, not hot. I can guarantee there is a truth and there's a reality which is more fundamental than your relative understanding of this universe, which is absolute truth, you might say, or what I call natural law. Even if you're a little baby and you go to the edge of a cliff, gravity works. Right? Natural law works. Whether you believe in it or whether you don't believe in it, whatever your perception of it is, it still operates. It's immutable. That's my point. It's not a matter of opinion.
What about the sort of miracles of you know, dissolving matter and walking over water, and that
I was
if you
thinking
don't
about
believe
that.
it anymore, then another reality becomes.
Well, in Sanskrit these are called siddhis, which means perfections. And these you can actually aspire to and you can actually get through very, very difficult practices, but they are also in accordance with natural law. They are natural.
High natural law then.
Yeah, they're a higher expression of natural law, but you have to practice to really bring that into incarnation. Mostly you have to clean this to be able to bring that higher expression into consciousness.
So Jesus and Buddha and all the
Yeah.
prophets,
They were very clear at this level.
they were free from samskara then.
Well, they'll never be free of samskaras,
No.
but they just weren't in the stimulus samskara emotional reaction. So anything that came up, they would actually bring the light of consciousness to it. They would view it from that place rather than just react. Can you see? And that would clean the samskara immediately. Clean it in the moment. You
With the
can do
God
that.
mind. With the God mind.
You have to have a good mind, yeah.
No, God.
Oh, of course, yeah, of course. Higher consciousness, yeah. But anyway, I don't want to get too much into that. I mean, there's the Advaita, Advaita thing. It's open to debate for a lot of people. As you can probably tell from my stance here, it's not open to debate. It's not.
Are you saying that the nothing is not separable from the everything? That the two will always exist?
Yeah, the two will always exist.
You can't just go back to nothing because within that is everything.
You can never go back.
Yeah.
Consciousness is always moving, it's always progressive, it's always dynamic. What would be the point of going forward and then going back?
So it coexists.
Yeah, it coexists, but it's simultaneously and inconceivably. See, we can sort of conceive of Advaita, we can sort of conceive of Vaita, but we can't conceive how simultaneously both of them can be true.
Yeah.
So most people go in with their minds.
It's the divine.
It's like material spiritualism. Yeah. It's not to say either of these perspectives don't give good people that have high realizations. But what I'm saying is I don't feel it's the ultimate truth, and I think we can go beyond that even. Because, I mean, no doubt these guys are doing good work in either camp. But I think it only takes you to a point, and then beyond that, you've got to come back to Achinta Bheda Bheda Tattva. You've got to come back to that because that is the natural law. Like fire burns, like gravity works, like light travels in straight lines.
Or it takes you totally out of balance, like you
It does.
described, and I've experienced that.
It does take you completely out of balance. Yeah.
Well, isn't that to do with like all the natural law being feminine and all of the thought processes of how consciousness is being masculine?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Again, you know, bringing that into balance because.
Well, our idea of natural law is masculine, and natural laws operate within the universe, which is feminine. But natural law is not masculine or feminine. Yeah. You see, it operates here, but it's not defined by here. It's beyond here because it's higher than here. It's a higher order that's defining this experience here. There are certain limitations, there are certain definitions by which we can function as human beings. This is defined by natural law. You can't argue with that. Well, you can, but you'd be completely mad. And most of us do. And all the trouble we get into is because we have an argument with natural law. We have something else called man-made law, which hasn't got anything to do with natural law, hardly at all. In fact, it usually goes in complete opposition to natural law, and that's why we're destroying this planet and the world. That's why we're all so traumatized and got so many samskaras, because we're not living in accordance with natural law, with what we naturally are. And we all know how that is because of something we have inside that guides us called common sense. But we abdicate our common sense for some other authority that tells us this is the way it is. And it's been like that for thousands of years. We have to have an authority all the time, instructing, telling us what's what. Whereas we have it all on the inside, just very commonsensically, we know how to live our life. We do know it. But we don't trust it, and that's why we go to authority.
Oh, gurus.
Gurus, teachers, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think we all need that from time to time. But yeah. Anyway. That's another subject. Actually, I do want to get into this subject a bit more in the spring, to be honest. I'm going to get my soapbox out and do a whole thing on conspiracies and money and religion and the New Age and authority and power. I mean, it's something I feel very passionate about, and I really want to nail this one because there's not enough people out there doing this kind of work. And the reason is because the sacred masculine is being crushed.
It's good to hear something different.
From Top Nets?
Yes, you guarantee this will be different. The sacred masculine has completely been wiped off the face of the earth, practically. Yeah, and this is the part of us that goes, cut through the crap. You know, this is what's true, this is reality. We're not allowed to say that anymore, it's politically incorrect. So anyway, I'm going to give a whole thing about this in the spring, a series of about 3 talks, which is all to do with this, and I guarantee it'll be very energizing and very lively. You'll either love it or you'll hate it. Yeah. Anyway, we were talking about some scars, weren't we? Yeah.
Before you got triggered.
I'm a quarter of the way through my talk. We're halfway down this poster.
They've been triggered, eh? You're triggering now. You're triggered.
Yeah, I'm triggered by time. Yeah.
Should I get some jugs of water?
Yeah, who wants water apart from me? I just. Yeah, let's take a 2-minute break. Okay, one of the reasons why I'm doing these talks is because although I'm very interested in metaphysical understanding, which is the masculine side, I'm also really into alchemical processes, which is the feminine side. So there's not much point really in my mind just understanding this and exploring this ad infinitum if it's not coupled with any kind of practices. So I wanted to introduce, and I won't have time before Christmas to do that, but for those that are interested, I want to introduce you to the practices that work on our central nervous system most powerfully. These are a combination of masculine and feminine processes coming together at the same time. So most practices are either masculine or feminine, like I said to you earlier. So the ones that I'm going to hopefully be showing you are to do with both. Integrated approach. I'll be doing that probably when I come back now from my trip away. I'm going away for a month. I'm back on the 15th of January. So for those that are interested, I'll put an email out at that time for a 1-hour class, or if you like, maybe upstairs, where we'll just do practices. So this part of it is the metaphysical understanding. The alchemical processes will happen in about 5 or 6 weeks' time when I get back. It would happen sooner, but Christmas is happening. I'm not here, so it has to wait until the middle of January. And then we'll be doing that. And of course, when I do that, I'll also be talking about all of this. And you'll have the next talk hopefully under your belt at that point. And please, 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 if I'm doing these talks again, please come. Every time it's different. Every time. You think you've heard it once and you know it? You don't.
No.
For you, whatever. £5 for a concession, or £8 if you're waged, or totally free if you feel like you can't afford it.
Meditation?
Oh, that one. Oh, I don't know how much that's going to be.
Oh no, I mean, are you talking about meditating?
Yeah, the practices that go along with this work. Because what I'm presenting here is only half of the equation. There's the other half. which is, okay, what do we do about it? Yeah. Okay. So most of this we understand.
What?
In terms of samskaras. We've got into that. In a way, we could say this is to do with what's called eat or be eaten. Eat or be eaten. When we're in a samskaric consciousness, we're in a reactive emotional consciousness, it's as if our consciousness is eaten. We're just reacting. We have no consciousness. The higher self, remember, is short-circuited.
That's fight or flight.
Well, fight or flight, yeah. Fight or flight, yeah. So when we're in that consciousness, our consciousness actually is eaten by the reactive emotional samskaric mechanism. What we want to do is we want to reverse it. We want for consciousness to eat the samskaras. So in all ways, we're either food, and for the most part as human beings we are basically just food for our consciousness. The consciousness is being consumed by our samskaras. Every time one is activated, basically we go unconscious. We're just in a reactive mechanism. And then the opposite is true. You understand that? And that's when consciousness then eats the samskaras, which is light. Okay, let's just have a quick look at manas and mind. Because really, we can't understand this completely if we don't understand how the mind works. Okay? The two are very much implicated in each other. In fact, you could say at one level that the mind really is a finer substance. It's the same thing. It is samskaric. It is a reactive mechanism, but it's much finer. So in Sanskrit, this energy really, well in Hinduism or then Vedanta, this energy is seen to be an energy which is obviously around our brain and our head. Yeah, because this is where most of our, and all of our thinking really takes place. So this energy in Sanskrit is called chitta. It's called chitta. And chitta holds the micro samskaras, which are known as vrittis. Micro samskaras, tiny, tiny, tiny little samskaras, a vritti. Each vritti is a thought. It's a thought that's expressed within the mind substance called the chitta. The chitta really is the equivalent of the samskaras in the body. Yeah? It transfers that thought, that vritti, through the chitta into the neurology, into our brain directly. Chitta is composed of Qing. Who remembers Qing? Yeah? This is what it's made of. Qing. This is chitta, astral substance, samskaras, and Qing. Qing is substance that, if you remember from last week, is only created in men in the testes and women in the ovaries. And the organs all donate roughly around about 40% of their chi to the creation or the manufacturing of Qing. It happens all the time. Yeah? So it's a very, very precious substance. It's what Tantra is all about, the preservation of our sexual essence or our Qing. It also affects our brain and our mind because it's the very substance, the very structure of the astral envelope around and that interpenetrates our brain is chitta, which is made from Qing and the astral. Can you see? So, I was telling you the story last time, I think you remember when I was a celibate monk, how my brain became very, very strong, very powerful. And this is why a lot of yogis, they practice celibacy, or they practice restraint and preservation or strengthening of their sexual energy, their Qing, so they can have that focus. Meditation. They can have that discipline because they have very, very powerful minds. Not because they've read a lot, they've studied a lot of them haven't. A lot of them can't even read. It's because they have the power and the force in their chitta, because they've got a lot of Qing. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. So Qing is very, very important when it comes to mind substance. Really, it is the mind substance in a way. And alongside of that, we have the vrittis. Now, a vritti is a thought. And it's much like a samskara, except it operates in a slightly different way. Whereas a samskara will actually express an emotion, a vritti doesn't express an emotion, it just links to another thought. Yeah.
Some thoughts can be very emotionally laden.
I'm going to get to that. Yeah. Because thoughts can trigger samskaras as well. Thoughts can trigger samskaras. I said that earlier, didn't I? Remember? Thoughts can trigger samskaras. Yeah. Which happens, and therefore the thought isn't emotionally laden, but what it's triggered is. You see, the samskara.
Could it not happen the other way around? The samskara triggers the thought.
It does. Yeah, it does.
Well, which comes first? Nobody seems to know.
Well, it works both ways. It's reciprocal. It works both ways. Mostly, if we want to clear our head, my understanding is this: our beliefs and our ideas are rooted in our bodily samskaras. Why? Because our mental development came much later. By that time, we had our core samskaras in place. You know, when is it we start to develop mentally? 7? By that time, it's game over as far as samskaras are concerned. They're already crystallized. The superstructure of the brain, our thinking and our beliefs are all just a reflection of our emotional hurts and wounds. Can you see that? It's our own filters, it's our own bias, it's our own leaning because of our early experiences in life. So if you want to resolve what's going on here in the chitta, you need to clear the samskaras in the body. Because automatically when you clear the samskaras in the body, it resolves the chitta. But otherwise, the vrittis, or the thinking, or the thoughts, literally just link. So what you get there is, have I got my thing here? It's a slightly different process. Similar, but different. And just one in red, maybe. So you get a thought. That activates a vritti. It gives you another thought. There. What we call a microsamskara or vritti gives another thought. And this we all notice, particularly when we want to try and be silent. When we want to try and be still. And we want to meditate. You don't necessarily notice it at any other time of the day because it's just autopilot, right? It's automatic. But when we're sitting there and meditating, at least this is what I find, it's like my mind just suddenly takes off. It's like I'm suddenly thinking this, and I'm thinking this, and I'm thinking this, and one thing leads to this, and it's like, oh, it's this, and there's 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 this. I'm thinking, oh, God, when am I going to get any peace? And it's this linking ability of the vrittis and the chitta that actually gives us this continuous thinking in the mind. This wind that constantly bloweth, that is never ever abated. And it is the nature for us to be samskared in our body, but it's also the nature of our vrittis to stimulate other vrittis. So in a way this is a never-ending process. It's constantly happening. The key is to not link one thought to another. So thoughts are always going to be coming up. Vritti, by the way, is Sanskrit. It literally means to turn away from the self. So thoughts are a mechanism within the envelope of the mind that turn us away from source. That's what it means, to turn away. Vritti, thought. So our thoughts block us again in terms of obscuring the light from heaven, for us to connect meaningfully to our higher nature. And this is why you can be very, very clever, and you can study and learn, and you can take loads of notes, and you can do loads of stuff, and you can be completely cut off. Cleverness and intellectuality doesn't necessarily mean you're any closer to heaven. In fact, you've just created a huge, enormous barrier that is turning you away all the time with every single thought. You imagine people that just think and think and think, intellects. And people that are just continuously doing this. I used to be like this when I was at school. I used to think it was a great thing. We're all taught to do this. And yet I felt completely depressed. why, if I'm not studying all these books, including, I have to say, scriptural stuff and esoteric stuff, and you might call spiritual information, why am I not feeling any better? It's like, I've got all this knowledge, I should be doing really well, I should be fired up. But I wasn't. It's because this also is a barrier. And very, very clever, very intellectual people are also very cut off quite often. Not to say they always are, but it is a barrier. It's very much a barrier, as much as our emotions are a barrier. And we are going to talk about feelings. I did say at the beginning, there's a distinction between emotions and feelings. And there's a difference between thinking and feeling as well. So feelings really hold the key to both of these things. But I just want to finish with the mind and the mind substance. You okay? Alright. So this is this poster here. So one thought or a perception triggers a microsamskara in the head, which is a vritti, which then links or chains to another thought. We need to break the links. We need to break the chain. So the vrittis will still operate, although they get slower and slower and slower, but they're more like birds that are flying through our landscape. They're not linking our consciousness and trapping our consciousness in a chain of thought that we're following anymore. Can you see? It's just like there's a thought, there's a thought, there's a thought. It's like, oh, interesting. Not linking. We create what's called a dissociative state in our thinking processes. And it catches me out all the time, this, I can tell you. I'm doing this and I'm doing really well and I'm feeling the stillness, and then suddenly I'm thinking, oh yeah, and there's this and there's that, and oh, no, stop. You know, I'm linking again. It's so automatic, it's unbelievable. It's so automatic. Until you actually start to try and be still, you won't realise just the power of this linking process and how it creates these chains. Endlessly, endlessly. It's constant chatter, constant chatter. That is natural. Arjuna asked Krishna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra in the Bhagavad Gita, you know, what is it that I can do about this? The thought or the thinking is like the wind. It's like the wind. How can you possibly ever control the mind? And Krishna says, well, with persistence you can. With perseverance you can. And this is what I was saying last time. This is not a sprint. It's not like we're going to suddenly become, you know, enlightened. You know, we drink some magic potion or we do yoga for a week. This is a marathon. You know, it's like, you know, this is a marathon. We're in it for the long haul. Or we're not in it at all. You may as well just not bother, as far as I can tell. Why bother? You know, you've got to see that actually this is a life process. This is something that's going to require persistence in the long term. Yeah? So, particularly around thoughts, my God, does it require persistence? Again, these also short-circuit the higher self. As soon as we're thinking, as soon as we're linking, we're not connected. We're turning away. Have I missed anything there? General malaise. General malaise. A feeling of slight depression, or a feeling of like, oh, I'm not quite right, feeling a little bit off colour today. This general background is to do with these micro samskaras, the finer samskaras in our head, in our thinking, and the micro samskaras we're carrying in our body, in our emotional processes. The finer level gives us this general uneasy feeling in life. Yeah, it's a constant hum. Constant hum. It's like what I would call an attenuation or a tension that's constantly in the astral body all the time. It's like we're all at a different stage of, you know, tension. Yeah? And these micro samskaras, you know, they hold the key, this fine level of samskaras, including the vrittis in our head, they hold the key to this general background of malaise. This laziness, this complacency, this like, oh, I can't be bothered, what's the point, you know, and all of that. That's the operation of micro samskaras in our system. A slight sort of feeling of depression. I'm sure we've all had that and experienced that from time to time. I know I certainly have.
So, Paul, how can you link all this with mental illness? I mean, is it mental illness the imbalance of some of this stuff?
Totally.
You know, like schizophrenia, depression, anxiety.
Totally.
Personality disorder,
well,
you name
yeah,
it.
something like psychosis and schizophrenia. How long have we got? Actually, I want to get to feelings, so I'm just quickly going to answer this, and maybe we'll pick this up next time. But mental illness really is just an amplification, really, of our samskaras. We all have samskaras. We all have mental illness. If you haven't discovered this yet, then, well, that's waiting for you to find out. When you really start to look into yourself, you'll start to see that actually, I'm pretty mentally ill, actually. I need some serious therapy. At least this was my conclusion about myself. I thought, gosh, I'm such a fucked up sort of person.
That's what they say when I went to an Asperger's conference. They said
Yes,
that we
yes.
all have Asperger's too.
We all have Asperger's. We all have all these conditions. We all have multiple personality disorders. We all have psychosis to one degree or another. It's all just a question of degree. The only individual that's a healthy individual is an individual that's got a clear astral body, that doesn't have any samskaras there at all, that the light of their higher nature can shine through. That is what you would consider to be perfectly healthy and totally normal. The rest of us are a bit wonky in one way or another, at one time or another even. Yeah? So mental illness really is just an amplification, an amping up of the attenuation that's already in the system. So the astral body is in a very, very heightened state, totally, and it's being dominated by one or two probably core samskaras that are grabbing and grasping that individual's consciousness and not letting go. Powerful. Yeah? Psychosis is more to do with what's going on in the head. Can we do that next time, actually? That's a big topic. I want to get into psychosis and schizophrenia, but it's a big topic next time. Yeah?
Emotions and feelings.
Emotions and feelings. Okay, I'm going to end it, actually, on emotions and feelings. Now, I'm sure you remember, because it wasn't that long ago, that I said basically emotions really is the recording that's held within the samskaras. Right? It's that expression, that amplified state that we feel when our astral body becomes highly amplified by the release of a memory from a samskara. That's an emotion. An emotion is not a feeling. Remember at the beginning of the talk I said emotion is not a feeling. They're totally 180 degrees apart. And yet in our society we go, bosh, they're together. In fact, in some cultures they don't even have a word that separates the two. They see emotions as feelings.
But in the house, they're on two different levels.
Totally different levels. Emotions are at the animal level, feelings are at the vegetative level. Feelings, basically, is our capacity to tune into source. Feelings always come from our higher nature, in other words. Emotions are always samskaras. Always. When we're having an emotion, that's a samskara. When we're having a feeling, that's the clear light of day shining through. That's a connection to ourself. Consciousness amplifies feelings. Consciousness diminishes samskaras. Because consciousness, in both cases, is really healthy. But I want to distinguish in terms of our behaviours, and this is why I've done this little thing here. I've created a little chart, so we can actually distinguish between emotions and feelings.
So are you saying that emotions are negative and feelings are always positive? I mean, that's what you see.
Well, emotions are always bipolar.
Negative and positive.
Yeah. Well,
But feelings, because they're connected to your higher self, are positive.
well, they are positive, yeah.
They're,
But
they're not negative.
no.
Okay.
No. Well, they are very positive, but I mean, are they negative? You could say you could see them in a negative way because they could actually activate samskaras. Because the higher self comes in and it will awaken something within you quite deep, hopefully.
We say, I feel sad, I feel happy, but are we talking about emotions really then?
That's,
Is
yeah,
that what you're
yeah.
saying? They're not really feelings.
Samskaras always express in a bipolar way. Always. It's the same samskara expressing positively or negatively. It's just the flip side of the same coin.
So the feeling is the sadness, the emotion is the expression of the sadness.
Yeah, the feeling
you
of
cry
sadness.
or you, whatever.
Yeah, this is the first point here. It's like emotions are always going to be bipolar, so you feel happy and sad.
It's how it gets expressed, the emotion, the feeling.
No, it's not an emotional feeling. It's an emotion. Emotion is happiness and sadness, right? The reason how you know that is because an emotion is transitory. It's not permanent. A feeling is permanent, it endures. It's only our capacity to tune into it or tune out of it that tells us it exists or not. But a feeling is permanent, it's like natural law. It's always there. So the feeling of joy, the feeling of ecstasy, the feeling of bliss is always there, pouring through us every second of every single day of our life. But most of us are tuned out of that.
But we feel sad as well.
Yeah, because we're operating out of our samskaras. We feel sad and happy.
But joy and sorrow are the same, aren't they? And I would say they're more like a feeling. You know, where you have a lot of pain or sorrow, or not pain, sorrow. Joy is mixed in with that. So that's more like a feeling, isn't it? It's not an emotion. You know what I'm talking about?
I would say that joy is associated with the higher nature, and sorrow is associated with the samskara, and you can feel both.
Really?
Yeah. You think in your higher nature that you are sorrowful?
No, but it kind of reflects the other.
No, it doesn't. You are one time tuning in, and the next time you're tuning out and feeling sad. You've gone into a samskara, and then you come out of a samskara. That's all you've done.
So would you say emotions are dualistic and feelings are non-dualistic?
Yeah, totally.
They transcend the
They
bipolar.
transcend duality. There's no flip side to ecstatic bliss.
Can you experience
Or to the-
ecstatic bliss without the opposite though? Wouldn't it just disappear the experience? of
Well, that's
that,
what we're
'cause
all
there
doing.
isn't the opposite to know it.
Yeah, in a way, we are doing that in a way, because this
But
is
we
the
want
opposite.
to be in a permanent state of that.
We do.
That's-
Yeah.
well,
We
it's
do want to be
interesting what
there.
you're saying.
So we have to give more energy to our feelings, right? And less to our emotions. That will strengthen our feeling nature, our connection to source, and weaken our connection to our samskaras. So in other words, we want to be less reactionary, we want to catch the samskaras earlier, we want to have less association with them. There's a scripture called the Ashvatakra Gita, and in there it talks about something called turning snakes into ropes. Turning snakes into ropes. So a samskara, when it's active and when it's operating, is like a snake. And we tend to go, oh, it's you, or it's the situation, or it's this. But actually it's not. It's just a samskara. It's just a rope. And when we see it for what it really is, we diffuse it. So we give it less energy. We bring consciousness to it. And at the same time, we really want to bring consciousness much more to our feelings. Because our feelings are our capacity to tune into higher nature. They always comes from the higher self feelings. Whereas emotions never, ever come from the higher self. They always come from samskaras. That is just a natural thing. That's how it is. So I'm going to quickly go through my little list here, and you'll see how you can distinguish maybe between them a little bit in terms of actually, is this a feeling or is this an emotion? Is this from my higher nature or is this from a samskara? Okay, and it's a helpful list. So I'll just go through this quickly, and then we'll have a little bit of a roundup and complete, because we're nearly 10 minutes over. Okay, emotions or samskaras are reactional. We know that. Whereas the higher self or the feelings are unconditional. So you get a feeling from source without any trigger whatsoever. It's like the sunlight that just penetrates through. There's no cause for that. It's just you've tuned in. It's always there. Just like the sun is always shining even when you can't see it. It's unconditional. Emotions can quickly turn into their opposite because they're bipolar creatures. So you can go from love to hate, back to love, back to hate, love, hate, I love you, I don't, no, I hate you now, no, I love you now. You know, it's like, oh boy, give me a break. You know, it's exhausting. You know, constantly. Yeah? So that's one way you can recognise that something's an emotion. You can see you get the flip side of it all the time. Feelings are always completely stable, regardless of feedback, regardless of the triggers, regardless of what's going on. They are always just consistently there. Yeah? Emotions arise from being triggered, whereas obviously samskaras, feelings arise independently. So you've got to have a trigger to activate a, but you don't have to have a trigger to activate a feeling. That rises independently of anything and anybody that's going on in your life. It's not dependent upon circumstances. People, place or thing.
So even though they're there all the time, they rise and fall as well? there's a flux within them?
No, well, feelings do, because feelings really is our inner sensory mechanism, and its capacity to tune into the signal from source.
Okay.
And it's our capacity to tune in that varies.
So what's the rise bit then? If they rise independently, is that your ability to tune in is arising independently, or is it that
The tune in,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what you're talking about.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because we can do that anytime. It's not dependent upon any condition, place, circumstance, person, whether we tune in or tune out. We could be in the middle of a blizzard, or in the middle of the most excruciating pain, and we could tune in. Or we can be sitting in meditation and tune in. Or we can sit in meditation and tune out. It's that defines it. But the signal is constantly there because you are consciousness that is always there. How can that not be there? Yeah? So, samskaras create more samskaras. Of course they do, because when our behaviour becomes modified by samskaras and we get angry, we get upset, or we punch someone, obviously then there's a reaction that comes that then causes some pain and some sort of trauma. There's a consequence to that that comes back to us from the universe that causes us harm and hurt, that creates more samskaras. Yep. Obviously, feelings do not create any more samskaras. That is the end of samskaras. Emotions are based upon grasping. Feelings are based upon letting go. Can you see that? Letting go. Emotions obscure or short-circuit the higher self, whereas feelings reveal the higher self. Okay? Emotions reinforce the link to the astral, whereas feelings reinforce our link to our causal or higher nature. Remember from last week and from the summary at the beginning. Emotions, let me see, I'm losing my track here. I need to get my glasses off. It's not like it's not big enough writing. Yes, emotions are favoured by a lack of awareness, whereas feelings are enhanced by awareness. And emotions decenter us away from ourselves. They're centrifugal. Emotions take us out, whereas feelings take us in. They're centripetal in their action. Emotions separate us from people and objects. People say this all the time. Oh, if I don't have my emotions, what have I got in my life? You know, it's how I connect with everybody. You know, it's the juice. But actually, no. Emotions separate because they put us into our own bubble, our own reality, our own perception. We're completely colour-washed by our samskaras. We're in our own world. Separate. That is the core samskara, actually. So the feelings bring us unity with people and objects. There's a distinction also between emotions and feelings. It's just a handful of emotions. Most of us experience just a handful of emotions. Whereas feelings are infinite. We can tune into anybody, anything, any object, any realm, dimension, being, anything, and feel what this is about in reality and truth with our feelings. Right? Emotions distort or co-wash our perception, whereas feelings clear our perceptual distortions. Emotions make you live in your world, whereas feelings allow you to live in the world. Because you're bringing more of your higher nature into incarnation, so you're more here. Emotions, more awareness makes them weaker, whereas feelings, more awareness makes them stronger. Okay. How are we doing? I've completely run out of time. We've gone 15 minutes over. I'm terribly sorry. I did race through that as quick as I could. But it took as long as it took. Are there any final questions before we...
I've just got, how does your definition of emotions and feelings equate with sort of modern psychology and people like Coleman, emotional intelligence? I mean, they don't see emotions and feelings in this...
Don't know.
Well, I don't think so.
I don't know. I don't know enough about that to comment on it, to be honest. I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not very convinced about your definition about emotion and feeling.
Good.
We shall have the debate another time.
Yeah, another time. You can watch the video later. Please, don't take my word for any of this. Find out for yourself.
But you can have an emotion and feel absolutely elated with that.
At the same time.
Yeah.
Because they're coming from two different places. So So you can have the emotion or samskara being triggered within you of say, intense grief or sadness, and still be feeling quite ecstatic, open and awake. Because you're tuned in, as well as your astral body automatically being activated or triggered from your environment. I've often done this. I've often found that actually, oh God, some horrible feeling is there, and then it's just like I tune in, and I can feel that and that. It's great.
So really,
Some
feelings
horrible
are
emotion.
just love,
Huh?
aren't they?
Some horrible emotions.
Yeah, some horrible emotions being triggered within me, not uncommon. Often I do get that. And I can still tune into that, thankfully. Not all the time, it's not always so easy, but I can get that while I'm getting that. Can you see? And when I say that, I mean the samskara, or the emotion, while I'm in this vertical axis of being in my feelings. There is one other level to this, which I don't have time to get into tonight. It's called the Vijnanamaya Kosha in Sanskrit, which is the feeling body. And the feeling body, which you might say is synonymous with the causal body or our higher self. I'm just going to end on that note, because the feelings really that reveal or connect us to that higher nature, the Vijnanamaya Kosha.
Vijnana is there. Isn't it?
It's there! Yes, it
The
is.
mental body.
I've written it here. Vijnanamaya Kosha. Yeah.
Mental.
Well, it says mental body there. What we mean by that is the higher mental, or the manas. We'll get into this a little bit more next time. I'm going to describe the higher self, what actually is the higher self. We'll get to it next time. I'm not going to talk about it now because it delay things a lot.
Is it possible to have any copies of these?
All of these are going to be available on my website after the last talk next week. And I am thinking, and I'm only thinking this time because there's a lot here that I haven't managed to put up either. Well, I'll say a lot, maybe about 4. And next week's talk, I was going to put into a little booklet. Because they were actually all in full colour. So I've only printed them black and white because it's £2.50 to print in black and white, 25 quid to print in colour.
Oh wow.
So it's a huge difference, yeah.
Maybe.
So yeah, I can afford to do them in black and white, but not in colour. But I was going to do a little book. I don't know, maybe we could see if anybody's interested. If I just put them all together and collate them as plates, there'd be a little A5 booklet that maybe, I don't know, just to cover my paper and ink for a £5 maybe.
Yeah.
With all the plates.
I think we need to digest this
Oh God,
over
yeah.
the months and years.
I hope I haven't given you indigestion. Okay, just before we go, who would be interested in that book for next week? Because if there's enough, I'll print some. So how many do I need to do? 1, 2, 3, 4, Luca? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Sammy, you're away, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm away.
Get it off me when you get back. So I'll do 20 books, and I'll bring them along. So you'll have it all. Yeah. Well, as far as the world according to Paul, anyway. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Going 4 more on.